My brother banned me from family events, but my 700K account left him speechless. He told me I wasn't welcome at our parents' anniversary, said I'd just make things awkward. What he didn't know was that I had just closed a $700,000 deal and I was about to walk into that party anyway. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, this story will stay with you long after it ends. My name is Lucas Bennett, 33 years old, a freelance software developer living alone in a modest apartment in Seattle. From the outside, my life probably looks unremarkable: an aging leather chair, a laptop that hums louder with each line of code, a near-empty fridge, and a coffee table that wobbles if you lean too hard. But to me, it's a world I built with my own hands, earned, not borrowed. For a long time, I thought that was enough. My brother Nathan Bennett is 36 and lives in the suburbs of Portland with his wife and 12-year-old daughter, Emily. He's everything I'm not: polished, strategic, and always in control. He runs a real estate management company, wears crisp suits without effort, and somehow manages to remember which wine everyone in the family prefers. His house has manicured hedges, a front gate that senses movement, and a living room no one dares to leave cluttered. Nathan has always had a presence. Even as kids, he led the games in the backyard, negotiated extra screen time with our parents, and picked the movies whenever we went to the theater. I was the quiet one, taking things apart just to see how they worked, writing my first lines of code before I had a driver's license. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just being me. When I was 16, I got a scholarship to attend a summer coding institute in California. It was the first time I saw my parents, Frank and Diane, look at me like I was something special. Nathan smiled, gave me a firm pat on the back, and said, "Don't let some camp fool you into thinking you're better than anyone." I laughed then, thinking he was joking. In hindsight, I'm not so sure. Over the years, his pats turned into polite nods and then into quiet critiques. My choice to attend community college instead of an Ivy short-sighted. Launching my freelance business instead of applying to Google too risky. The irony is, he always said those things like he was offering help, as if steering me away from failure, but never toward anything of substance. Our parents used to run a small bakery in a working-class neighborhood. They retired a few years ago and moved to Portland, closer to Nathan. He organizes things so well, Mom would say. And we're too old to stress about hosting. That became the family default: holidays, birthdays, even casual Sunday dinners all migrated to Nathan's house. Invitations came from his wife's email. Seating charts were color-coded, and somehow I always ended up next to the guest who talked about stocks and didn't understand what I did for a living. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe it was just efficiency. But over time, it became clear I was a peripheral figure in my own family. My suggestions for meetups were politely declined, my achievements mentioned in passing, if at all. I became the guy who worked from home, who coded stuff, who was probably doing fine, but no one really asked. Only Emily, Nathan's daughter, never treated me like an outsider. She had the same curious eyes I once saw in the mirror, the same hunger to learn how things worked. Whenever I visited, she'd pull me into her room, eager to show me her latest Python script or ask if her code was beautiful. "It's better than mine when I was your age," I'd always say. And it wasn't flattery. Emily was the tether I held onto as the family orbit shifted farther from me. I made an effort attending her school showcases, sending her coding books, helping with her logic puzzles, but still the gap widened. The house felt more curated, the conversations more rehearsed. And when I wasn't invited to something, no one asked why I wasn't there. I didn't blame them. Not really. But I started to understand something quietly devastating. You don't have to be told you're not part of a family. You just have to be left out often enough to believe it. The email from LinkPay hit my inbox on a Tuesday morning while I was debugging a line of code that had me up past 2 a.m. the night before. I'd spent 6 months developing their payment platform, clean APIs, smooth UX, all delivered ahead of schedule. The subject line read, "Update regarding your contract." The message itself was colder than I expected from a team I'd once had weekly coffee check-ins with over Zoom. Due to an internal restructure and budget reassessment, we regret to inform you that we are terminating your contract effective immediately. Thank you for your contributions. This is not a reflection of your work. I stared at the screen, blinking. Just like that, the one contract covering my rent, insurance, utilities, groceries gone. My heart didn't drop immediately. I'd been through this before. Freelancing is unpredictable feast or famine. I had a strong portfolio, solid references, I'd bounce back, except this time I didn't. I spent the next 3 weeks firing off applications like flares into a dark sky. Every day, write, revise, submit. Silicon Valley startups, nonprofits, ed tech ventures, local contractors, anything that paid. But the market was shifting. Tech companies were downsizing. Budgets were frozen. Remote first was now remote forever, which meant competition was global. Still, I kept the news to myself. I didn't want pity. I didn't want Nathan to hear about it and twist it into a sermon on why I should have joined his firm years ago. Instead, I reached out to Mom, texting her a simple, "Hey, are you guys doing anything for Easter this year?" The typing dots popped up, disappeared, popped up again. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. Her voice was cautious, not warm. "Hi, sweetheart. Oh, Nathan and Rachel are hosting this year again. You know how he is with planning. It's already pretty full." I paused. Full. A beat of silence. "He invited some of David's co-workers," she said, "and their church friends. It'll be a little packed." I laughed dryly. "I'll sit outside, Mom. I'll bring my own chair." She didn't laugh. "I just think, with everything you've been going through lately, maybe you need a quiet Easter, something restorative." I said nothing. The words hovered in the air like smoke from a small fire. Then came the dagger. "Nathan thought it might bring the mood down, you know." I swallowed hard. "So, I'm not welcome?" "No, that's not what anyone said. But it's what you're doing. Lucas, don't make this bigger than it is. Your brother's just trying to keep things light. You know how he gets with events. He's worried you'll feel uncomfortable. He's worried he will," I snapped, then immediately regretted the heat in my voice. She sighed. "I'm not choosing sides," but she was, and we both knew it. "I'll talk to your dad," she added softly, like. That made it better. It didn't. We hung up. I stared at the gray light seeping through the blinds, the silence of the apartment louder than any rejection email I'd received. Later that day, I got a message from Nathan as if he'd just remembered I existed. "Hey, just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. We thought a quiet Easter might be best for everyone this year. Maybe next time. No apology, no invitation. Just corporate speak wrapped in brotherly obligation." I didn't respond. 2 days later, I called Dad. I don't know what I was hoping for, maybe that he'd laugh it off, say. Of course, I was welcome that he'd clear a space at the table himself. But instead, I got a slow sigh. "Your mother told me about the Easter thing," he said, voice gravelly. "It's complicated, son. What's complicated about it? Nathan's taken on a lot. He plans everything. He means well. We're just trying to avoid conflict. Your mom's been stressed, so I'm the conflict." No, that's not what I'm saying. Just maybe this year, sit it out. Come by after. We'll have leftovers, as if that was all I was worth. That Sunday, I sat alone in my apartment eating grocery store rotisserie chicken, watching Instagram photos flood in like clockwork. Nathan's house decked out in pastel linens and floral centerpieces. my parents smiling politely beside church friends. Emily holding a bright pink basket looking toward the camera but not smiling. No one reached out. Not that day. Not the day after. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I just sat there staring at the screen until my laptop went dark from inactivity. Because in that moment I realized something painful. I hadn't just lost a job. I'd been quietly erased from my family's narrative, one careful decision at a time. The weeks after Easter passed like sludge, thick, slow, and hard to shake off. The freelance boards dried up. The few promising leads turned into polite rejections or radio silence. I watched my savings melt like ice in the Portland sun. Bills stacked up in quiet, accusing towers, rent, utilities, my phone plan. Groceries became rationed, one meal a day, coffee replaced by hot tap water. I'd renamed it a diet just to pretend I had control, but the worst part wasn't hunger or rejection or even loneliness. It was the silence. No check-in from Mom, no word from Dad, no text from Nathan, not even the usual performative thinking of you messages he sent out like press releases. I hadn't expected an apology, but I thought someone might at least notice my absence. Or question it. Instead, the world moved on without me. That is, until I got a message from Aunt Clara, Dad's younger sister, the one who always gave me books as gifts while Nathan got golf equipment. "Hi, honey, I hope you're okay. We missed you at Easter. Nathan said you were busy with work. Hope all is well." There it was. A lie dropped casually like a pebble in a pond. Nathan had told the family I'd skipped Easter because I was busy. Busy. I stared at the message. I hadn't been busy, I'd been uninvited. And now I was being rewritten, sanitized, removed quietly and completely. I typed and deleted at least 5 versions of a response before settling on, "Actually, I wasn't invited, but I appreciate you reaching out." She didn't reply. The next gut punch came a few weeks later. I was scrolling through social media because apparently I enjoyed self-inflicted pain and stumbled across photos from Dad's 65th birthday dinner. It was held at his favorite steakhouse downtown, the same place we'd gone every 5 years since I was a kid. Long table, family surrounding him. Cake with the classic chocolate frosting he loved. Nathan standing behind him giving a toast. Mom holding a glass of wine, beaming. Emily in a navy blue dress I'd helped her pick out 2 birthdays ago. And me nowhere. No text. No invite. Not even an afterthought. That night I called Mom. I didn't plan to yell, but my voice was already shaking by the time she picked up. "Why didn't anyone tell me about Dad's birthday dinner?" There was a pause long enough for my pulse to pound. "Lucas, sweetheart, it was just something small. Nathan organized it last minute. You know how fast he moves. Mom, there were 20 people in that photo." She sighed. "He said you might not want to come, that you've been overwhelmed. I didn't want to pressure you, so you believed him." Another pause. He handles the details now. "We're getting older, Lucas. It's easier. Right, easier. Easier to let Nathan control the narrative. Easier to assume I was the problem, not the one being pushed out." That night, Emily messaged me on Discord. Her words were clumsy and rushed like she was typing while watching the hallway. "I'm so sorry, Uncle Luke. Mom said you were invited but didn't show." I didn't believe her. There it was again. Another version of me rewritten and fed to the family like fact. This time I felt something heavier than anger. I felt hollowed out. A week later I got a call from Cousin Brian, the kind of cousin you only see at weddings and funerals. His voice was polite, almost too polite. "Hey man, just wanted to check in. Aunt Diane said you've been going through some stuff. You okay?" I knew what he was really asking. "Are you unstable?" Should we be worried? I forced a laugh. Just between contracts, budget cuts, not personal. Right, he said, as if checking a box. Just making sure. You know how family talks. Yeah, I knew. I hung up and stared at my phone, wondering how many people thought I was having a breakdown. How many assumed I'd snapped, failed, vanished. All because Nathan had quietly whispered it into enough ears. It was strategic, efficient, brutal in its elegance. He didn't cut me out with a machete, he did it with a scalpel. From then on, the invitations stopped entirely. No more group texts, no calendar pings for family BBQs, no word about birthdays, game nights, or holiday prep. When I called Dad to chat, the conversations were short, polite, transactional. Everything good, yep. Nathan just signed a new property near the lake. Great, your mom's been helping with Emily's project. Cool, no one asked what I was working on. It felt like I was calling into a home I no longer belonged to. Even when they did visit Portland, they'd meet Nathan for lunch and run out of time to swing by my place. Or they'd suggest I come to Nathan's house just for a quick bite. I always declined. I wasn't going to pretend nothing had changed, because something had. Something fundamental. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was a footnote Nathan had edited out of the draft, and no one, not even the people who raised me, had reached for the red pen. But one person did notice. One person refused to let me vanish. Emily kept messaging. Small things, her Python project, school frustrations, memes. We'd chat about for loops and semicolons. She called me Uncle Luke, the code wizard. It broke me in the best way. Through her, I felt tethered to something real. Not the family's curated image, but a thread of truth that couldn't be clipped. I was disappearing in my parents' world. But in hers, I was still seen. I'd listed my laptop on Craigslist the night before. Not because I wanted to, but because I'd run out of choices. It was the last thing of value I owned, my tool shed, my kitchen, my currency. The fan had started whining on startup, the keys were fading, and the trackpad had developed a twitch. But it still worked. Barely. Selling it meant game over. No more job hunting, no more coding, no more dignity. I stared at the listing page for hours. I didn't publish it. The next morning, Marcus showed up without texting first. That was his style. My best friend since freshman year at Greenview Tech, grinning like he owned the world, carrying 2 coffees and a bag of bagels like a culinary hero. He looked around the apartment, took one glance at my empty cabinets, and set the food down without a word. "You're not listing that laptop," he said, nodding toward the table where it sat like a dying soldier. I didn't argue. I just stared at the coffee cup. He sat across from me and unwrapped a poppy seed bagel. "How long since your last gig?" "Almost 3 months," I said. "Everything's dried up. No one's hiring freelancers. They want full-time or offshore." "Have you considered doing something else?" I raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Sell candles on Etsy?" He smirked. "Actually, I might know someone who's looking." That got my attention. Marcus pulled up his phone and showed me a startup called Brightmind, an education tech company, aiming to build accessible learning tools for underfunded school districts. Their mission was bold. Their website was terrible. Their app barely worked. "They're local?" I asked. "Yep, Portland-based." The founder, Rachel Lynn, was in my grad school cohort. Brilliant, a little intense. She's looking for someone to rebuild their learning platform. Everything front-end, back-end UX. She's already fired 2 contractors, so she's difficult, she's focused. There's a difference. I looked back at my laptop. What's the pay? Not great, but equity's on the table if the project takes off. Think of it as getting back in the game. I'm not even sure I'm still a player, Marcus. He leaned forward. "That's not for you to decide. Let her see your work and tell you." I agreed to meet Rachel that Friday. Her office was a converted loft in a crumbling building that had seen better decades. The kind of place where startups are born exposed brick cables like vines, whiteboards crammed with equations, and a fridge stocked with sparkling water and two kinds of hummus. Rachel met me at the door, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She didn't shake my hand, just gestured for me to follow her into a glass-walled conference room cluttered with wireframes and coffee mugs. Marcus says you can build clean, scalable systems, she began, folding her arms. We need to gut and rebuild our student portal. It crashes under volume, isn't accessible, and teachers hate the UI. Can you fix it? I blinked. That's a lot in one sentence. She didn't smile. We don't have time for fluff. I nodded. Walk me through the use cases. We dove straight into whiteboard diagrams. No small talk, no HR-friendly icebreakers. It was exhilarating, like sparring with someone who actually knew the weight of every move. She grilled me on back-end structure, database redundancy, mobile responsiveness. She interrupted me mid-sentence, challenged every proposed solution, made me defend my thinking in real time. Somewhere in the second hour, I realized I hadn't thought about Nathan in days. This woman didn't care who I was in my family, what schools I'd skipped, or how many contracts I'd lost. She only cared whether I could solve her problem. When we finally paused, she said, I can't match what you probably earned at LinkPay. I'm not earning anything right now. Well, this isn't charity. You'll work hard, tight deadlines, minimal hand-holding. But if you deliver, equity bonus and future contracts are all on the table. I nodded. My throat was dry. When do you need someone? Yesterday. I walked out of that office with the kind of ache in my shoulders that only came from real use. Back in my apartment, I stared at the laptop listing again. I clicked delete. Then I opened my IDE and began sketching the architecture for BrightMind's app rebuild. Not because I was hired yet. Rachel said she'd circle back, but because I wanted to prove I could. Not for Nathan, not for my parents, not for a post on LinkedIn. For me. 2 days later, Rachel called. I've interviewed 4 people since you're the only one I couldn't argue down. I smiled. You're hired. 6-month contract. You'll report directly to me. Don't make me regret it. The following Monday, I stepped into the BrightMind loft with a repaired sense of gravity. I wasn't whole yet. I was still broke. Still bruised, still off the guest list of my own family, but I had a new table to sit at. And this time, I wasn't waiting for an invitation. The first few weeks at BrightMind were unlike anything I'd experienced in years. There was no hierarchy to hide behind, no time to sulk. Rachel expected answers, not excuses. And the team, small but sharp, moved like a unit trained in fire. Everyone carried a weight, everyone built something. I was one of them now. I started with the app's back-end, rewriting the broken framework into something lean, clean, and expandable. I worked nights often until my eyes blurred, but it wasn't desperation driving me anymore. It was momentum. It was pride. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch when my phone buzzed. It wasn't Nathan. It wasn't Mom asking if I'd heard anything yet. It was Allison from UX pinging me on Slack to troubleshoot a screen layout. Or Rachel tagging me with an update, new schools added to the pilot, good job. Most days I skipped lunch and ate cold leftovers at my desk, but it was by choice, not out of scarcity. Still, I hadn't forgotten where I'd come from. My fridge was fuller, but I hadn't replaced the second-hand chair. I kept it a silent witness to the nights I almost gave up. The Craigslist listing deleted, but never forgotten. Marcus dropped by the office one Friday evening with 2 coffees and his signature smirk. You look alive again, he said, taking in the scribbled whiteboard behind me. I grinned, half delirious from lack of sleep. I think I might be. He pointed at my screen. This is the version of you Christine and Nathan could never see, and that's on them. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The code spoke louder than I ever could. Meanwhile, the silence from my family continued. No calls, no messages, not even from Mom, not since her brief, awkward voicemail after Easter. Nathan had drawn the line and they'd all followed. That invisible gate around family events was now firmly in place. But Emily hadn't shut me out. My niece, the one person in the family who still reached across the divide, kept our connection alive through Discord messages and late-night video calls. "Aunt Megan, sorry, I mean Uncle Lucas," she teased one night, laughing when I flinched. "You're the only one who understands my Python bugs." We debugged her school project together, a budgeting calculator for middle schoolers. Half the logic was off and her UI looked like it was from 2008. But I saw that spark in her eyes, the same one I'd had at her age. "Keep going," I told her. "No one else needs to get it, just you." Emily's messages were often the only thing softening the edges of my new world. Rachel, for her part, was all business. At the 6-week mark, we had our first real sit-down since I'd started. She scanned a usage report, nodded, and tapped her pen. "Student engagement is up 63% since the beta launched." "That's you, Lucas." I blinked. "Team effort." She didn't smile. "Don't dilute your impact. Own it." Then she slid a new contract across the table, an extension with a modest raise and a note about equity vesting starting in Q3 if we hit regional benchmarks. The old me, the broke, anxious, couch-sinking version, would have cried. But I didn't. I thanked her, signed, and got back to work. This wasn't a comeback. It was a rebuild. By mid-fall, Brightmind had onboarded 5 new school districts. Our app was on over 3,000 student tablets. A district superintendent in Northern California called our real-time feedback tool a game changer. And then came the moment I didn't expect: an acquisition offer. Rachel called an emergency team meeting. We all gathered in the cramped lounge, pizza boxes stacked high, and she made the announcement like it was just another Sprint check-in. "A major edtech firm wants to license our platform. 7-figure range. Clean exit. Residual royalties." Silence. Then chaos. Someone cheered. Allison actually cried. I sat there stunned, a slice of cold pepperoni pizza halfway to my mouth. Rachel looked straight at me. "They asked for a demo build with your codebase. That's what sealed the deal." The acquisition closed 2 weeks later. Rachel negotiated hard to protect the team's equity shares. I walked away with $700,000, my post-tax share, deposited into my account on a rainy Thursday. I stared at the bank notification like it was a prank. But it wasn't a joke. The man everyone forgot, excluded from birthdays and anniversaries, just closed a deal that would have made headlines if he were the kind of person who bragged. I wasn't. I didn't post it online. I didn't call my parents. I didn't even text Marcus right away. I just sat in my apartment, lights low, laptop open, and exhaled. I was no longer broke, but more importantly, I was no longer broken. I took a walk that night through my old neighborhood. The sidewalks were wet, the air sharp with early November chill. I passed by the diner where Nathan and I used to sit with Dad on Saturday mornings, him eating pancakes, me sketching website ideas on napkins. For the first time in years, the memory didn't hurt. It just sat there, like a stone I no longer had to carry. I used some of the money to clear my remaining debts, paid off my lease, upgraded my laptop quietly, sensibly. I moved into a modest 2-bedroom home on the edge of Portland. Nothing flashy, just mine. No gated community, no polished photos, just a front porch and a desk by the window. The first box I unpacked was Emily's handmade sketch of our calculator project. I framed it, I wasn't back in the family, but I was back in my life. The invitation never came, but the whispers did. It started with a slip-up from my cousin Lindsay, a chance encounter in the baking aisle of a Trader Joe's. She mentioned a big dinner at Nathan's house, Mom and Dad's wedding anniversary, 35 years. "You're coming, right?" she asked, smiling as she dropped a bag of almond flour into her cart. I froze. "When is it?" Her smile faltered. "Next Saturday. Nathan rented out the Willamette estate. It's a surprise, I think. Christine's helping with the seating chart." She looked at me again, this time slower. "Wait. You knew, right? I didn't. No one told me. Not my parents, not Nathan, not even Emily." I nodded anyway. "Yeah, sure. Looking forward to it." Lindsay smiled, distracted, and wandered off. I stood in front of the pancake mix, heart pounding. The same scene over again, except this time it wasn't Easter or a birthday or Christmas. This was our parents' milestone, a lifetime of marriage, and once again I was erased from the guest list. I drove home on autopilot. The setting sun threw streaks of gold across my windshield, but all I saw was the flicker of old wounds reigniting. They hadn't learned, or maybe they had and just didn't care. But something was different now. I had nothing left to lose, no more dignity to protect, no more pride to swallow, no more hope that they'd suddenly see my worth. I was done being polite. This time I was going. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call anyone or demand a seat. I simply made preparations. A week before the party, I visited my bank and requested a cashier's check, $50,000, enough to cover the remaining mortgage on my parents' house. A promise I had once quietly made to myself back when the bakery was struggling and Dad's back gave out. I'd wanted to be the kind of son who could lift that burden someday. Now I was. I tucked the check into a slim navy envelope and set it on my desk right next to the invitation I never received. The night of the party, I dressed deliberately, navy suit. Pressed shirt, clean shoes. Professional, modest, nothing flashy like Nathan's polished perfection or Christine's designer sparkle. I didn't want to draw attention. I wanted to claim my place. The Willamette estate shimmered in the evening light, all glass and candlelit interiors overlooking the river. I parked far from the entrance, away from the Mercedes and luxury SUVs, and walked up the gravel drive like I belonged. Because I did. No one manned the front. Laughter and music spilled from the open French doors. Crystal glasses clinked, and I caught a glimpse of Aunt Shelley in a sequined dress raising a toast. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stepped inside. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. The hum of the room softened to a murmur as I walked past linen-covered tables filled with familiar faces. Cousins, great-aunts, Dad's fishing buddies. Christine stood near the bar in a gold cocktail dress, a flute of champagne frozen halfway to her lips. Nathan was mid-sentence at the head table, one arm resting behind our mother's chair. His voice faltered. His eyes found mine. I didn't stop walking. I made my way to my parents, who both stood as I approached. Mom looked startled, her hand instinctively brushing her hair. Dad looked unsure, torn between relief and guilt. I smiled softly. "Happy anniversary, Lucas." Mom's voice cracked. "We didn't know." That I knew, I offered gently. Lindsay told me. "It's all right." Before they could respond, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope. I placed it on the table in front of them. "This is for you," I said. "A gift. For the house. No strings." Dad's hand trembled as he picked it up. He opened it slowly, then blinked as he registered the number. "Lucas? What I've been doing okay," I said simply. "Better than okay." Christine was at my side in seconds. You shouldn't be here, she said through a tight smile, her voice low and furious. This is a private event. You weren't invited. I turned to her calmly. No, I wasn't. But I think we both know why. Her eyes flicked to the check, then to my parents, then back to me. What is this some stunt? No. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough. This is me showing up, despite you. The room had gone quiet again. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't make a speech, but I didn't shrink either. I lost one contract, I said. One. And you made it your mission to exile me from this family. You painted me as unstable, unreliable, something to hide. Christine scoffed. You were struggling, and so what if I was? I snapped, finally letting the heat rise. Isn't that when family's supposed to show up instead? You locked the doors and told them I'd become someone not worth inviting. Nathan stepped forward, finally, a warning in his voice. Lucas, this isn't the time. No, I said, leveling my gaze at him. It's the perfect time. You've had control of this family's narrative long enough. I could feel everyone watching. Cousins whispered. Aunt Shelley clutched her pearls like a soap opera scene was unfolding. I didn't care. Let them see. Then it happened. A familiar ping sounded from my pocket. I pulled out my phone, and before I could silence it, the screen flashed with a bank notification. Account balance, 703. 129.04. Christine's eyes caught it. Her jaw slackened. You, she whispered, voice shaking. Is that your money? I met her gaze firm. I sold the app, a deal with Brightmind. I lead the dev team now. She took a step back. No words, just silence. For the first time, she had nothing to say. My parents were still frozen. Mom reached for me, her eyes glassy. We didn't know. We thought. Christine said I know what she said. I interrupted, softer now. But you could have called. You could have asked. Nathan finally broke in, trying to reclaim control. Look, this is not the place to... You made it the place I cut in. You kept me out. You defined me by a rough patch and erased everything else. I turned to the crowd. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to say I'm done begging for a seat at this table. With that, I stepped back. The silence in the room said more than applause ever could. I didn't stay for dessert. I didn't need to. I'd already had my closure. The silence after the party wasn't immediate. That night, my phone lit up with a few messages, cautious, fragmented. Aunt Clara, proud of you for standing up. That took guts. Cousin Brian didn't know half of what was going on. Thanks for speaking your truth. And then hours later, Emily. I wish I'd been there. I would have clapped. I smiled at that one. But then the silence returned. No calls from my parents, no attempts from Nathan, no apology, no angry rebuttal, just nothing. At first I wasn't sure how to feel. The confrontation had been years in the making, anger aged into precision, but catharsis didn't feel like relief. It felt like free fall. I had spoken. They had listened, or at least heard. Now what say turned a suit. I went back to work. Brightmind entered its next phase, scaling beyond regional pilots, onboarding national partners. My role shifted into something hybrid, half dev, half lead. Rachel offered me a permanent position with shares and decision-making power. I accepted. But my head wasn't entirely in it. Not yet. Something had cracked open at that anniversary dinner. Something I couldn't ignore. For years I'd told myself I wanted to be seen, validated, reclaimed by the family who had once pushed me to the edges. But after the party I realized it wasn't about being welcomed back anymore. It was about learning how to live forward without waiting for someone else to unlock the door. A week later, my mom called. The voicemail was short, measured. Hi, Lucas. I'd like to talk if you're open to it. No pressure. Her voice wavered at the end as if she wasn't sure whether she was allowed to say more. I waited a day before calling back. She picked up on the first ring. Lucas, hi, Mom. She was quiet for a moment, then, you blindsided us. I know. I wish you'd warned me. I tried, for years. A sigh. You looked strong at the party. Grown. I let that sit. I didn't realize how much we'd lost, she added, almost whispering. You didn't lose me, I said. You gave me up, piece by piece, every time you chose not to ask, not to question. You handed over our relationship to someone who told you it was easier that way. There was no anger in my voice, just weight. She didn't deny it. I miss you, she said. I paused. I miss what we were, but I'm not the same. And neither is the version of me you're used to. I want to know this version. I believed her. But I also knew it would take more than a phone call to change a decade of absence. So I offered something small. Lunch, neutral ground, no Nathan. Okay, she said quickly. Just us. We met at a little cafe near Laurelhurst Park, the kind of place we used to go before Emily was born. Before family gatherings became strategic performances. She wore a cardigan I remembered from childhood, her hair silvering gracefully. We didn't talk about the party. We talked about her garden, my job, the dog she and Dad had rescued last winter. It wasn't deep, but it was honest. When we stood to leave, she reached out not for a hug, but to touch my elbow lightly. Thank you, she said. For what? For not making me beg for this? I nodded. It was a start. I didn't hear from Dad until a month later. He showed up at my place unannounced, hat in hand. Literally. A 6-pack of root beer and a bag of bakery cookies like some kind of peace offering. He stood on the porch awkwardly. Your mother said you'd be okay with this. I let him in. We sat on my porch watching rain beat across the railing. He didn't say much. Neither did I. But after a long pause, he cleared his throat. I should have asked questions. I know, I just figured Nathan knew what he was doing, and we were tired. It was easier to let him lead, even when it meant losing me. He flinched. We didn't mean to lose you, but you did. Silence again. Then quietly he said, I saw your check. Haven't cashed it. It wasn't about the money, I know. That's what makes it harder to... Over the next few weeks, something unspoken began to shift. No grand reconciliation, no family dinner with violins and closure, just space. Mom started texting more. Dad would send me dumb links and blurry photos of the dog. Emily and I kept building projects. She was teaching herself JavaScript now. Nathan stayed silent, but Christine reached out once. A single email, terse and transactional. I hope you got what you wanted. For everyone's sake, I hope you're satisfied. I didn't reply, because for once I wasn't playing her game. Chewed. In early spring, I gave a talk at a local dev meetup. It was small, maybe 40 people in a brewery's back room. I spoke about failure, specifically how losing a contract saved my life. Afterward, a young developer pulled me aside. I've been where you were, he said. How'd you climb out? I thought about it for a moment, then answered, by realizing I was never buried, just planted. One day I found myself back at the old bakery my parents once ran. It was now a wellness cafe with matcha lattes and oat milk everything. But the bones were still there, the tile floor, the counter, the memory of cinnamon in the air. I ordered tea and sat near the back, and for the first time in years I didn't feel angry, I just felt free. The first time Nathan reached out after the party, it wasn't to apologize. It was a text, vague, formal. Let's grab coffee sometime, talk things through. I left it unread for a week. Then curiosity, or perhaps that old instinct to make peace, got the better of me. I replied, okay. When and where? We agreed on a cafe halfway between our places. Neutral ground, Saturday morning. I arrived first and chose a table near the window. I wore a plain button-up. No armor, no posturing, just me. Nathan walked in 10 minutes late as always, crisp jacket watch glinting. He offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lucas, he said, like we were cordial colleagues. Nathan. He ordered a black coffee, sat down, and folded his hands like a lawyer prepping for arbitration. Look, he began. I think things got unnecessarily dramatic at the anniversary. I said nothing. He continued. You ambushed the whole evening, put Mom and Dad in an impossible spot. I put myself back at the table, I said, that's all. He shook his head, chuckling without humor. You really think you were the victim this whole time? I blinked. I wasn't playing victim. I was excluded over and over. You were struggling. I needed help. You used it to justify cutting me out. He leaned back. You're still the same kid who used to cry when I beat you at chess. Still sensitive. Still thinks the world owes you something for being smart. I took a slow breath. I never asked the world for anything. I just didn't expect my own family to act like I didn't exist. He waved it off. Come on, man. You're fine now. Rachel's company, that bright. Whatever, it worked out. Let's not drag this on. I narrowed my eyes. That app helped thousands of kids. It's called Bright Mind. He sipped his coffee. Right. You code. You're behind the scenes. That's your thing. Something in his tone struck me. He wasn't trying to understand. He was minimizing. A week later, Rachel and I were invited to a local startup mixer, a casual event mostly networking hosted at a rooftop bar overlooking the river. I wasn't in the mood, but Rachel insisted. Investors will be there, she said. New partners, you've earned your place in the room. So I went. I didn't know Nathan would be there. He was standing by the wine bar, chatting with two real estate developers in pressed khakis and loafers. His laugh loud, his charm on full display. I could see his wife Christine working the room nearby, sipping white wine and whispering pointedly into a woman's ear. I kept my distance. Until halfway through the evening, I overheard him. He was telling a story, some self-congratulatory anecdote about cleaning up family drama. Then I heard it, clear as day. Yeah, Lucas is my younger brother. Sweet guy, bit emotional. Always was. But we're good now. He's doing something with tech, quiet back-end stuff. Not leadership material, but he's found his lane. I'm proud of him, though he's trying. She's just my little brother. My blood turned to ice. He hadn't just misspoken. He mocked me, diminished me in front of strangers, and he didn't know Rachel was standing right behind him. She tapped his shoulder lightly. He turned still mid-sentence and froze. Rachel smiled, calm but razor sharp. I didn't realize Lucas had changed pronouns, she said dryly. But for the record, he's our senior partner. He rebuilt the platform that just landed us 3 national contracts. Nathan's face paled. I was joking. Of course he's capable. Just teasing. Rachel didn't flinch. You weren't joking. You were erasing. I stepped forward, then placing my hand lightly on Rachel's shoulder. It's fine, I said, not to protect him, but to close the door. Nathan turned to me now, sweating slightly. Lucas, come on. You know how I talk, don't take things out of context. I smiled. I didn't. I just finally heard them in context. He looked ready to speak again, but Rachel already turned away. We've got a pitch to prep, she said to me. Let's get some air. We walked to the far edge of the rooftop. The breeze was cool, the city below, golden and blurred. Sorry you had to hear that, I said quietly. She looked at me. Don't be. It only confirmed what I already suspected. I raised an eyebrow. What's that? You're not under his shadow, she said. You never were. He just cast a long one and for a while you stood in it. I swallowed hard. I'm out now. You are, she nodded, and for what it's worth, I'd bet on you, every time. That night I didn't dream of old wounds or missed invitations. I slept, deep and undisturbed. Because finally I understood Nathan didn't need to see me clearly. I did. I nearly missed her message. It came on a Tuesday evening buried under Slack pings and project updates. A single line from Emily. Do you still want to see my final project? I stared at the screen, guilt blooming in my chest. 2 weeks ago, I'd promised I'd help her review her submission for the Oregon Tech Youth Showcase. A web app that tracked micro-donations for environmental causes. She'd been working on it for months. It was her first build from scratch, and I'd forgotten. I'd been drowning in pitch deck's deadlines and my own swirling thoughts after the rooftop mixer. Somewhere along the way, I'd started telling myself I'll call her tomorrow. Now tomorrow had arrived, and she had asked, gently, almost apologetically. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, Uncle Lucas? Her voice was cheerful, but I could hear the hesitation underneath, like she wasn't sure if I'd come through this time. Emily, I said. I'm so sorry, I forgot. Can we do it now? She hesitated. It's kinda late, and I already submitted, but if you want to see it. I do, I said quickly. Send me the link. I'll stay up. 15 seconds later, it hit my inbox. I clicked. The site loaded, and I stared. It was rough around the edges, some spacing issues, and the mobile responsiveness wasn't perfect, but the core was brilliant. Simple UI, clean logic, real data tracking. She'd even built a dashboard for user impact over time. I wasn't proud of her because it was good. I was proud because it was hers. I said into the phone, this is incredible. Really, she asked, voice lifting. Really, it's meaningful, thoughtful, and it works. You made something real. There was a pause. Then she whispered, thanks. I wanted you to be the first person to see it. My throat tightened. I should have been. That night after we hung up, I sat in the quiet dark of my home office for a long time. Because here's the thing. No one tells you about healing. It's not a straight line. You can cut ties with the people who hurt you, build something new, even stand your ground at a party full of ghosts, and still somehow you can almost recreate the same pain you swore you'd never inflict. I thought about the times Nathan had made me feel invisible, the birthdays he forgot to invite me to, the events where my achievements were reduced to footnotes. And here I was, almost missing Emily's moment. Not because I didn't care, but because I got busy. Because I let other people's validation take up too much space in my head. Because I assumed she'd understand. That was how it began, wasn't it? That was how we lost each other bit by bit. The next weekend I drove to their house. I hadn't visited since the anniversary fallout. Christine was out, thankfully, and Nathan was working upstairs. Emily answered the door in fuzzy socks and a hoodie covered in cat fur. Hi, she grinned. Hi. She hugged me. Just a quick, fierce squeeze, then dragged me inside. Her room was chaos in the way only a 12-year-old coder's room could be: wires, sketchpads, half-eaten granola bars. On the desk sat her laptop, proudly open to the project submitted confirmation screen. You sure you don't want help cleaning this code up? I teased. She rolled her eyes. Only if I get stuck, otherwise I want it to be mine, even the bugs. I laughed. That's the spirit. Then I pulled a small package from my bag. Inside was a keyboard, compact, mechanical with blue backlighting. I'd built it myself, custom switches and all. Her eyes went wide. Wait, this is for me. It's yours. For the next project. She stared at it, then at me. Thanks, Uncle Lucas. I nodded. Just remember, you're not small. You're not behind. You're exactly where you're meant to be. She looked like she might cry, but didn't. Instead, she plugged it in and opened her IDE. You want to see what I'm building next, always. We spent the afternoon debugging together side by side like we used to when she was 9 and didn't know how to format a div properly. But now she was teaching me new frameworks, new ideas. And somewhere in that messy, wonderful moment, I felt something settle inside me. A circle quietly closed. I hadn't become Nathan. I had caught myself just in time. And that, more than any deal, any vindication, felt like real victory. Later, before I left, I passed by the dining room where family photos still lined the wall. I noticed a new one taken at the anniversary party. Mom and Dad smiling at the head table. I wasn't in it, of course not. But I didn't look away. I didn't resent it. Because I had something better now, the clarity to know which moments mattered and the courage to show up for them, not for performance, but for presence. On the drive home, Emily texted me a link to her next project's Figma mock-up. I pulled over and opened it. At the top of the wireframe, co-designed with Lucas Bennett. I sat in my car staring at that line and smiled. Not everything broken needs to be discarded. Some things, some bonds can be rewired. Gently, intentionally, together. Spring turned into early summer, and with it came a kind of quiet I hadn't known before, not the silence of exclusion, not the ache of being overlooked, but the kind of quiet that follows peace, the kind that lives in freshly brewed coffee, early morning light, and emails that don't make your stomach knot. Brightmind was thriving. Rachel had brought in new hires, and I was now co-leading development, mentoring junior engineers, and overseeing our expansion into 4 new districts. But the work didn't consume me like it used to. I'd found a rhythm structure without suffocation. My world had grown, and so had my sense of self. One afternoon, I hosted a small gathering at my home. Nothing fancy, just 8 people, 2 folding tables, and a grill that sputtered like it had seen better days. Emily came early to help set up. She brought a batch of cookies burnt at the edges but filled with pride. Mom said these were too ugly to bring, she grinned. So I brought them anyway. I smiled. They're perfect. Rachel arrived next, then Marcus and his boyfriend Calvin. Allison from Brightmind brought sparkling lemonade and her loud, brilliant laugh. Even my mom showed up late, yes, but bearing a basket of homemade bread and the kind of nervous energy that comes with rebuilding bridges. She gave me a quick hug at the door. Your dad wanted to come, she said quietly, but he wasn't sure you'd want him to. I nodded. Next time. She smiled like that was more than she hoped for. There was no seating chart, no announcements, no performance. Just people. Real ones. We ate in the backyard under string lights Emily had helped me put up. Someone played music from a Bluetooth speaker. Rachel told a story about her early investor meetings that had us all in stitches. Emily rolled her eyes but laughed anyway. At one point, I stood back from the table and just watched. Not out of detachment, but to take it in. This was the guest list that mattered. Not the ones curated by family politics, not the ones dictated by guilt or obligation, but the people who showed up without being asked. The ones who saw me not through the lens of past mistakes or old hierarchies, but for who I'd become. Later that evening, as the sky bruised into dusk, Emily sat beside me on the porch steps, her knees pulled to her chest. "Do you think people ever really change?" she asked. I took a long sip of water before answering. "I think people reveal themselves more honestly over time," I said. Sometimes that looks like change. Sometimes it's just us finally seeing them clearly. She nodded slowly. I think Dad's starting to see things. Maybe I said, and maybe that's enough for now. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm glad you didn't disappear. Me too. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from my father, handwritten on paper that smelled faintly of the garage and engine oil. Lucas, I watched your talk online, the one from the developer meetup. A friend from the VFW forwarded it to me. You said something about being planted, not buried. I've been thinking about that ever since. I don't know if I'll ever say this right to your face, so here it is. I was wrong. I let someone else tell me who my son was, and I listened. Not because I believed her more than you, but because it was easier. But you didn't need easy. You needed us to show up, and we didn't. I hope someday you'll let me try again. P.S. I'm cashing the check, not because of the money, but because I want to honor what you offered. Thank you. Dad, I read it twice, then once more. I didn't cry, I just folded it gently, slid it into the drawer beside my desk, and exhaled. Some wounds don't heal the way we expect, but they can still close. Chapter 2. In late July, Brightmind held a small team retreat by the coast. At one point during a bonfire circle, Rachel turned to me and asked, if you could go back and change anything about the last 2 years, would you? I thought about the nights I couldn't sleep, the pain of being cut out, the humiliation, the hunger, the loneliness. Then I thought about the rebuild, the people I'd met, the quiet victories. Emily's blue backlit keyboard glowing in her room. I shook my head. No, I said. It hurt like hell. But it brought me here. She smiled. Good, because you've got something now that most people spend their whole lives chasing. What's that? Freedom, she said, and clarity, and your own damn table. I still pass by Nathan's neighborhood sometimes. I wonder if he ever thinks of me, if he regrets how things unfolded. But I no longer wait for his apology. I no longer build my worth around his absence. My seat isn't waiting in his house anymore, because I've made one here, where I belong. The guest list is different now, and that's exactly how it should be.